Okay, so welcome to this latest episode in the Disruptive Technology series from the Digital Transformation Lab here in UCC. And absolutely delighted today have two guests with us, two for the price of one. We've Cantu, Toney, and we also have Michael Cantu. And what I'll do is maybe I'll ask each of you just briefly and quickly to introduce yourselves, and I'll hand over then to Toney to start us off. Cantu?
Well, as he said, my name is Kathy Kent Toney, and I am the owner of Kent Business Solutions, and we are a business transformation consulting firm.
Cool. And Michael?
Yeah, so I am managing partner of Accelerate Technologies. We build technology for process automation to work with companies who are looking to grow their organization, streamline processes, and start automating some of the work that they do. So
great. Well, guys, you're most welcome. And we should say you're coming in from Kansas, in the middle of the USA, so you're most welcome. I know Kathy going back a bit. Michael, lovely to meet you. You guys have written a book, No Nonsense Digital Transformation, and we love digital transformation. So why don't we start there? Like, why did you write the book?
Yeah, so, Kathy and I have spent a lot of time working together. And I think one of the things that we noticed in the market was that there are a lot of books about specific topics, but there aren't a lot of books that talk about the steps for success that an organization would need to take in order to get there. And really, we saw the gap, and that was sort of our initial step into saying, hey, there's a need here. How can we help other people? And let's put together some of our experience together. So
yeah, and we're aware of the statistic that 70% of all digital transformations fail. And so we wanted to provide a step-by-step roadmap for business leaders, and two types of business leaders. One is they're just starting their digital transformation journey and they may not know where to start. They may not even really know what it is. So we defined that in the book, talked about some tools, and then we provided a step-by-step roadmap for them to journey towards success. And then we also wrote the book for business leaders who had experienced some of these failures, and they're just maybe concerned about stepping into the waters again. So we, again, wanted to provide that roadmap so that they can be successful in their journey and feel more confident about being on that journey.
Okay. And actually, business leaders who've tried but failed, I mean, obviously their experience is fantastic. Did you get to talk to some of those leaders?
Yeah, I think through the course of doing all of this, the topics that we chose to address are a lot of times the topics that we had discussions with folks about. For example, sometimes you have all the correct variables, but something is missing. You think you're starting out correctly. You have what on paper might look great, but then you might be missing one or two pieces. So really from those conversations, it was taking a holistic approach, not just technology, but looking at, human dynamics that also play into that, HR type of items, mindset type of correlation, and then how do you set goals and sort of move through those. So a lot of that feedback came from folks that we have spent a lot of time with and talked through.
And I was very interested when I was reading the book, and it might say more about my mind than anything else, trying to figure out what different perspectives do each of you bring that maybe one is different to the other in certain regards. How would you characterize those differences?
Well, Michael is definitely the technology guy. When I wrote the book, I downloaded all of that stuff living in that smart brain of his and put words to it. So I am the process improvement person. I'm a Six Sigma black belt, lean professional Scrum Master. And so what I do is if I find a potential prospect or a client who wants to streamline their processes, I obviously can go in and do that. But if they want to automate them, then I bring in Michael, or vice versa. If he finds somebody who wants to automate processes in their business, then it's very important to go in and streamline them first, remove the fat and the waste and other things. So that's what I do. We complement each other really well that way. So it's a great partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, when you talk to most people about change and change management and whatnot, it's usually people, process, and technology. Now, clearly, Kathy, you're saying you bring the process and Michael brings the technology. And the people part, you've already referenced the people side, Michael. I mean, it is really all around the people, but you need to be able to do the process and the technology, but it really is about the people.
Yeah, you know, I think that sometimes is one of the most underestimated actual tools that organizations have, because it really does come down to the quality of people that you're working with, everywhere from the project managers that you're choosing, depending upon the type of project that's getting rolled out, all the way down to developers and their ability to communicate with each other, and also maybe look in between the lines of what maybe a customer is saying and what they're actually needing, and being able to make certain choices that would correlate to what the actual need is versus what might have been communicated. So, you know, when it comes down to bringing people together, people are the number one key. That to me extends even out to the customer, getting them feedback, whether it's internal customers and stakeholders that you have buy-in within your own organization that you're transforming, or whether you're consulting with another organization. It really comes down to building relationships with people at the end of the day. Yeah.
And just, I know in a previous life, I would have spent a lot of time in what was called business process reengineering at the time, back in the sort of 90s, the early 2000s. And it always amazed me sometimes when we look at change as a process change, we stop looking at the bigger picture, and it becomes all about optimizing, all about efficiency and productivity. And for me, and I know, Toney, you've spoken a lot about that, you know, that transformation really needs to be about, first and foremost, sort of transforming the very essence of a business. What advice can we give? Because I know you talk about creating that vision. How can we support organizations to get beyond what is there today to looking at that bigger picture?
You know, one of the things I think about that is from my perspective, I think it comes down to leadership and their ability to vision cast, and that their ability to also commit, because digital transformation, I think a lot of projects fail because of the lack of commitment or the lack of understanding of what it takes to actually go through with a plan, the transitional items that are sometimes not known at the beginning, but experienced during the middle, and really committing to that and having a strong vision amongst all of your peers in the organization, and also a strong vision in all of the employees that are involved in the project. There has to be buy-in, and I think that's probably one of the things I would mention on that.
Yeah, if you don't have that buy-in from the top that flows down, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be successful. You know, we were working with an organization lately, and there was that situation where there was not the buy-in. There was a buy-in at the top and then several employees, but, you know, there's one person that is not on board that can sabotage the whole thing. So it's so important to have that buy-in all across the board.
Yeah, I mean, okay, from my experience, you know, what I see is, you know, when firms start talking about digital transformation, the immediate response from the people in the organization is, this is management shorthand for job cuts, your optimization of processes that will be automated, therefore I won't have a job. So you really do need to get that vision across. Now, one of the things you talk about in the book, and I'd be interested in understanding it a bit more, you talked about what sparks companies to start their transformation journey. So what were the main things that you guys discovered as you went through this?
Well, you know, from a transparency perspective, I think sometimes what we've encountered is, number one, a lot of times some of the best results from digital transformation come from having no other option. Some organizations are on that trajectory and they have no other option except to say, how do we make this work? And then at that point, sometimes you get some of the best buy-in there is entirely, because you get people across the entire organization say, you know what, we're going to merge, we're going to acquire these XY businesses, and we have to find a way that we're going to work together. And at that point, you have employees that are really saying, at first they think about their job, what does this mean for me? But then they really say, hey, we really need to come together to figure out what the end result is. And to me, it always turns back. The conversation first is like an inward conversation where you're like, what does this mean for me as an individual? And then what does it mean for my organization? And then at the end of the day, when it refocuses back at the person that you're serving or the customer that you're serving, that's when that realignment with the organization comes together and says, you know what, in order for these customers to continue to get the best value, we really have to look at ourselves and commit to something. Organizations that are typically doing fine, but at least in my experience, that could use maybe some additions, but they're not necessary. Those fall typically, I think statistically from my background of projects, into the side of the projects that aren't as fulfilling to the people that are participating in them as they are for the people that need to make a change. And I think that need can come from many different places. It can come from an economic need that they have. It can come from your customer changing, meaning that who yesterday's customer was is not today's customer. There's a cultural shift out in the market. And you have to really figure out, is this our way? Are we real? Are we going to remain relevant? And I think that's one of the things that we mention in the book about maintaining relevancy across your industry and culture is really what spurs the most successful transformations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
Kat, you want to come in?
Yeah, and you know, I'm not sure, was it in the book or was it an interview he did? And I think Gordon Treadgold was on it as well, and he mentioned, look, 3 very simple, you know, questions: what, why, and how. And I think it really encapsulates what you're saying there as well, Michael. Though, what is the change? Why is it important? You know, and who's it important to, and how are we going to do it? And I think it captures it very, very well. You know, and you used a concept there, vision cast, and I'm not sure, does it mean a lot more? Maybe it means a lot more than our audience thinks it means. Was it Michael? I think you used the term. What is it?
You know, honestly, I think there is like an envisioning phase with every customer, because if they can't see it, they can't believe it. That has been my experience with it. It's like, if you can't go there in your mind, or the best people to lead the transformations are people that can conceptualize what the end product could be or what it could feel like afterwards. And then for the people that aren't quite as great at conceptualization, they can communicate how it's going to feel, how it's going to be, how the work might change for people that are more literal when it comes to that. But that would be my perspective on that there.
Yeah. And Toney, you know, one of the things you do talk about in the book is around, yeah, there is a role for technology, and you acknowledge that it doesn't start there, but you know, you're very specific around some technologies that can actually enable the transformation, and one was automation and the other was low code, no code. Right?
Yeah.
I'd be curious in terms of how you see those, helping firms to transform, and what's the key ingredient that it's bringing to the party.
Yeah. So what's interesting is there is a concept that while you were talking really like came out to me from my past and studying and stuff was, what are you hiring something to do? And what job is it doing? And I think when you're going to figure out what the customer and work with them, or you're doing it internally, right? And you're trying to figure out what are we really looking to achieve? You're really defining that job to be done. And then that next phase is really saying, what does that job look like if we could start applying technology to it? And does it make sense for us to apply technology to all pieces of that job to be done? For example, sometimes when you're building your customer sales pipeline, right? Some customer categories love to have high touch with you. It's all about building trust up front. They want to read some stuff about you, but they also want to communicate with who they're going to be doing business with. So automating that entire experience up front might not make sense, or applying all these different technologies. One of the technologies that might be just something that you employ there is just a document signature type of method, right? And then you're doing different types of document storage with some types of automation components that go with that, but still allowing the person to be in control and to interface with that customer. That to me is probably one of the best ways to look at it. And then other areas to, is really like, what efficiency do we have to get? And is there better time that can be spent somewhere else? Because I really think technology does a great job of time management and assisting with that and keeping focus. And in some tasks, you're really looking at volume. In some of them, you're looking at quality. Like, I've got to get a certain quality of things that are done in this relationship or interaction. And then some of them have to have both. And if it comes down to accuracy, I think, from digital perspective, computer assistance is always something that's great for verification types checks. But when choosing that technology, I really think it comes down to that use case and the level of touch you're really looking to have. I mean, Kathy, we have been working on a project this previous month where we were talking about DocuSign, and it was the entire sales process. And Kathy can tell you a little bit about that and how me and her sort of talk through technology piece too.
Yeah, what we did, one of the very first things that we do is we map out a process. So we mapped out the process, and then as we were discussing all the different pieces of it, it's like, oh, this technology would be really good to use here. And one wonderful thing about the software that Michael has is it has the ability to bring siloed systems together. So that was going to be one aspect of the project, that we would connect this system in and bring all this data into Accelerate, so that the employees, they wouldn't have to log into all these different systems. They could just log into Accelerate, and all this information that they needed to do their job would be in one place. So every project we do, we'll map out that process and identify the current systems, and then identify like what other system we want to bring in. For instance, Stripe was one system that we wanted to bring in for payment processing. So it just really depends on the customer needs, what they want to accomplish, and then we decide what technology we want to use to address that scenario.
Well, does this not come back to mindset? Because I've been in with clients and they say, "Oh, we're investing in this. We're getting this new CRM system, whatever." And I'd say to them, "Well, great. What's that going to do?" And they say, "Well, it's going to give us loads of data." I'd say to them, "But you have loads of data today, and you don't use any of it. So what's going to be different?" So, yeah. I'm kind of always curious in terms of the technology, because if the mindset isn't right, the technology is never going to be used anyway. right? So I suppose what I'm particularly interested in is, okay, how do you bridge that actually this is going to, make us more relevant, as you say, Michael, or it's going to help us do something better. But why should I care, right? Because you're now imposing new technologies on me that I don't know anything about, or it's going to make my life miserable, perhaps, right? So how do you get that mindset piece right so that people are willing to embrace the technology?
Okay, so I think one of the key components, I really believe this, and at first, when I first started, I thought, oh, this is sort of a outlier. What I realized with folks is that the more I think it comes down to the culture that you create inside of your organization, and I say this because the more honest and open people can be about their true thoughts about what is going on, the more dialogue that they will create. And then also, I think it creates some sort of like cognitive dissonance in people's minds when they hear opposing thoughts, or they hear that, wow, these people are on board, but I'm not yet. What is it about me and why am I not there yet? Or they hear that someone else isn't, right? And so we do talk about also creating a culture of radical acceptance among folks, right? To me, that is so important when it comes to mindset, because people come with so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures, so many different skills, so many different thoughts about a lot of people, some have had bad experiences. You get the occasional folks that have had fantastic experiences throughout their whole professional career, and bringing that mindset together. And really a lot about that mindset to me is rooted in the objections. And why do we think we can't get there? Why is it that we feel that this is not going to work? And so that culture of radical acceptance really gives you the ability to have people voice their opinion of, hey, we tried this 3 years ago and this thing didn't work, and here is why I think it didn't. The worst way to start out a project is to think that there have never been problems or somebody has never thought about how to fix it before. And there's a lot of people that think that, but then you'll always get the person, there's always one or two people that sometimes are the project wreckers. They are but really they're not even into wrecking the project. They just want to talk about it and say, hey, what steps do we need to implement? This is what we saw last time, and here's the 50% that you guys don't know about what we're doing. And then when that all comes full circle, everybody can understand the geography, the terrain. They can understand the things that are in front of them that are on the side that might be hidden, that they don't know about. And then they can say, oh, I can actually see why you're saying that, and here's where we need to go. And then I think that mindset also needs to be rooted to a measurable goal. And we talk about that in the book too, because the worst thing to do is to start out saying that we are going to do good. And because it's very nebulous, we are going to digitally transform this business, because that is nebulous too, right? It is non-measurable and not easy to put steps for success in order to measure along the way. So I think when that plan is there and you get sign off from other folks, and those folks can say, you know what, I at first was an outlier, but now after we talked about it, I see this, I can commit to this. And then I honestly think, and this is the same methodology too, right? Getting an upfront contract from people in sales, it's where you ask someone and you say, will you commit to this? And they say, and then you can deal with objections. I think that same sales process takes place within your teams. It's can you commit to this, and what are your objections, and let's work through them to get to an actual thing that we can agree with on moving forward. So and that brings that collective mindset. So
yeah, I just wanted to touch on something Michael talked about, this radical acceptance. There's a great illustration in the book about Bob, who is just overworked and he's just spending a lot of time and he seems stressed. And, you know, when you have that radical acceptance, people support each other. People feel free to share those objections, to share their experience without recrimination. I mean, they can just speak up and share whatever. When you create that culture of that radical acceptance where people feel free to be themselves, that's when amazing things can happen. So for instance, with Bob, he's overworked, and somebody said, oh, hey, I'll come in, jump in and help you out, knowing that Bob would do the same thing for them. And so when there is that culture where you're supportive, there's open communication, people are willing to go the extra mile. And when people are willing to go the extra mile on a project, that's an amazing thing. That will really contribute towards success.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting because I really take the point that, you know, digital transformation, we're transforming to create a culture, but I also think digital transformation itself nearly shows the culture. And I think sometimes the way we do transformation in a way is saying what the real culture of the organization is, you know. And I would say, sort of again, coming from that process background, that sometimes I think starting off with the idea of process change, we've already nearly told everyone what the end game is. It's all about process, you know, and I think we have to bring people into it. I don't think it's just maybe informing them. I also think it's collaborating with them. They feel, and I know it within the book you use that word empathy, and I think that's really, really important. And I think that's a section that definitely people listening here may want to zone in on. Just something, and I know Toney mentioned it earlier, the sort of the no code, low code, and it's obviously there's a lot of focus on this at the moment. I also think, though, that sometimes we're forgetting the governance part, that we think low code, no code now means we don't have to have some of that heavier machinery, that governance structure in place. Any comments about that, guys?
So I will give a recent example. So working with a startup, right? And the startup is growing very quickly. And I think sometimes even within our organization, you can have new startup arms that are growing quick, or maybe there's a need to be as agile as possible. I mean, in that organization, we're utilizing website builders and, you know, automation campaigns for marketing and chats that are easy to employ. And I mean, there's hundreds of people coming through those chats every day, right? And what's so interesting is that how my perspective pivoted a little bit is that, you know, especially coming from a technology perspective, most folks will tell you, oh, we should code that ourselves or whatever, you know, and it really comes down to time to money. What's your efficiency equation you're looking for? But I mean, we deployed a website within less than a week, right? We're making changes to pages within 30 minutes. They're adding auto responses to chats in less than 5 minutes on no code sites, right? They're adding new form fields to their own CRM as they need new fields to it by just saying, hey, I want to add this to the CRM, click it, add it, save it. And it is entirely functional and working for a business that is growing multi-million dollars so quickly. So I, you know, from a no code perspective, even when you get into process management software, a lot of it is no code as well, to get tasks that would move across your organization or to show up in someone else's queue. And I think what I've seen, I think in the industry overall, what we've seen even through the last 3 years of everything we've been through, people have to pivot quickly. And so their adoption, they get past the roadblock they create in their mind of saying, oh, no code sounds cheap, into can we transition our organization quickly, and can we experiment with new areas, whereas before, when we're doing things from a traditional perspective, from a code only perspective, that realization is impossible. And I can tell you that this organization would not have grown to where they are right now in the timeline that they've grown there without having no code software. So, you know, I think the biggest question is the long-term longevity of a of a no-code software. You know, however, I think if you're getting the value now, even if you code, you have to transition or upgrade your code later. So do the benefits outweigh the negatives of a no code? And I think looking at the opposite of that too, do the benefits of code outweigh the negatives of code too? Really can get you there. I mean,
yeah. And I'd say in some cases, Michael, it's the wrong word, because of course, what it takes to, let's say, change a business rule or change a process isn't just code. There's requirements, there's testing, there's all sorts of extra. And I think in a way, it has reduced it to being a code issue. And actually, in lots of cases, the code isn't the issue at all. It's the, let's say, the testing or lack of testing. It's the lack of understanding or the understanding. And I think that's maybe what I mean by the governance bit, you know, especially with something like a digital transformation. If it's a real deep transformation, and we're changing, I'm going to use the word to be provocative, you know, we're changing some core business rules or process or willy-nilly, is that going to excite some companies? Yes, I would agree. Other companies, I'd say, will be absolutely, you know, they'll be really worried by that idea. And I know, I think you've spent time maybe in claims processing, I have, etc. You know, but the idea of changing some rules, just, you know, it isn't something that we should be thinking is a 5-minute job.
Yeah, you know, for the change management portion of that too, I think even I think that's a really good point that you made, because the time to change it is so quick. If the change actually adapts to a normal scenario that is useful, is exactly what you were mentioning. Like, I think that's the biggest question, because you know what I find interesting about no code is when you really go to solve a problem, what you mentioned earlier about the processing and the time to do the process mapping, that is always the longest portion. When it comes to no code, right? It's not a question of like, hey, is this functionality that we're trying to get to too complex to the point to where if we were going to code it, it'd take us 5 years, versus now you've got the window of ability to change very quickly, but you still have that front end loaded area. So I do think that does need to be thought through and adopted, and folks also sign off on what that changes. The nice thing is, though, is if you do make a change that isn't great, you can change it back or undo it pretty quickly to get you right back where you were, to make that modification. So
interesting. Yep. I'm just on the process side there, Kathy, because you know, when COVID hit, lots of firms was, oh, we need more digital. And they thought it was just, we'll have more digital ads or more digital sales, whatever. But in reality, a lot of them actually didn't understand their customer journeys. And they certainly didn't understand the processes that would underpin those customer journeys. And even if they had bits of it, they were all in silos. So from a process point of view, how do you get the firm to understand, actually, here's what the customer is really trying to do, and here's how it should flow through your organization?
Yeah. Well, I worked on one project one time, which ironically was a customer experience, voice of the customer process. And one of the very first things that we did was we found out, we did a survey with their customers to find out when we interact with you to gather customer feedback, what's most important to you? So one of the things that they said, or the major thing they said, was we want it to be convenient. So we held a Kaizen where we presented all of this information from that survey, and then we built that process based on that convenience factor. But then we also had to weigh it against what the employees wanted. So we did it in a voice of the employee survey. Well, what's important to you? We took the best of the both worlds and we married that and created a system that they could gather that customer feedback, know how to incorporate it into developing their new products. And the system was very successful. In fact, when it was implemented, they developed one new product in one company based on the customer feedback they gathered. And they increased sales within a couple months by over 40% and opened another lucrative market in another foreign country. So it all goes back to finding out what the customer wants and developing that process around what the customer wants.
Okay, and Cantu, just a question there. Which school of thought are you in? Is it the one, well, let's understand the process and tear down the silos, or let's understand the processes and get the silos to work together?
The latter one. You definitely want to understand the processes, and then with this no-code platform, Accelerate, you can bring all those siloed systems into one spot. So we talk about getting it to a point where employees don't have to chair swivel. So they don't have to swivel their chair to log into this system. They don't have to swivel their chair to log into this one. They just log into one place to get everything that they need.
Interesting.
I'm just conscious of time, Tony, and I know we could talk and ask questions forever. I just want to come back to maybe the core of the book, guys, and maybe looking for a very quick summary. I know he referred to the steps for success, and they're probably the chapters. Do you want to give us just a very quick rundown of what those key steps are?
Sure. So first of all, you want to determine what tool you want to use. And then you want to we talked about mindset. We really want to have a collective mindset that leads to people wanting to go all in to support the transformation. And then that goes hand in hand with culture. So you want to make sure you have that culture that's going to be supportive of that people would be willing, like, to step up and help Bob to finish what he needs to do, to give him a break. And then next we talk about developing a plan and how to properly do that. And then you want to execute that plan. And then afterwards you want to measure success. And then you want to make any changes along the way to make sure that you're keeping on track. And that's pretty much the roadmap.
And it's essentially nearly each of the chapters, and they're a great read. And also, if I remember correctly, you added in a very, I suppose, timely, was it the final chapter, you know, about working in more remotely in the likes of a COVID age, you know, which is a nice addition as well to the book.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Tony, over to you. I'll let you close it down from here. I've really enjoyed it. Do you want to take us away from here?
Yeah, no, look, great to get the guys in from Kansas, all the way across the Irish Sea, or the Atlantic even. But no, fantastic to have you here, and, you know, best wishes for the book. I read it, I enjoyed it, and I think it'll go down really well. Look, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to thank our steering committee. I'd like to thank Cork University Business School for its support, and to thank our audience for tuning in. And, you know, I suppose the book is there. You'll get it on Amazon and all the other usual sources.
Yeah.